Bert was a German Nazi soldier in early 1945 during the final phase of World War II. At that time, he and other German troops were moving through a forest area called Klipp, located in Germany, as British forces were advancing into the region. As they slowly made their way through the forest, they were suddenly met with gunfire coming from all directions. The British had surrounded and taken control of the area. The German soldiers ran in panic, trying to avoid the heavy gunfire and grenades raining down on them. Bert stood frozen, holding his friend who had been shot dead in his arms. In that moment, the German forces were defeated. Sometime later, as night began to fall, Bert was captured while still lying on the ground. He and the other Nazi soldiers were taken to a prisoner of war camp in Lancaster, England. The next morning, all the prisoners were lined up in the camp yard. A speech in English was read out, explaining the rules they had to follow during their time in the camp, and it was then translated into German. This is where his story begins. This is the Keeper. According to international agreements, prisoners of war were not to be harmed as long as they followed orders and worked as instructed. When the British commander asked if everyone understood, the former Nazi soldiers responded in German. Hearing this, a young sergeant named Smith stepped forward and told them that while in England, they were required to respond in English.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir!
Later that night in the barracks, Bert asked his roommate for a cigarette. Unfortunately, his roommate did not have one either. Struggling with the discomfort of going without one, Bert eventually fell asleep. The next day, Bert was summoned to Sergeant Smith's office. He was asked whether it was true that he had once received a Nâzi medal known as the Iron Cross. At first glance, such a medal might seem impressive, but this one carried a dark meaning. Any soldier who received it was believed to have taken part in violent acts, since the Nazi forces were known for mass killings. Knowing this and able to speak English, Bert responded to Smith in a rude manner. His words quickly backfired. He was immediately ordered to clean the camp toilets and remove all the waste inside them. While pushing a cart filled with filth outside, Bert noticed other German prisoners playing football on the camp field. Seeing the sport he loved as a child suddenly lifted his spirits. Later that afternoon, while resting in the barracks, Bert came up with a plan to get cigarettes. He challenged the men playing football outside to a penalty shootout. The deal was simple. If anyone managed to score against him, they would get cigarettes. But if Bert stopped their shots, they would have to give him theirs. Confident in his skills, Bert agreed, even though he did not have a single cigarette if he lost. The shootout began. As Bert prepared himself in goal, his attention was suddenly drawn to a beautiful woman stepping out of a car with her father near the field. She leaned against the car while her father went inside to speak with one of the camp officials. Bert then forced himself to focus once again. Not long after penalty shot was stopped by Bert. One by one, the men failed to score as Bert caught and deflected every ball that came his way. Again and again, they tried to break through his defense, but none succeeded. Cigarette after cigarette changed hands, and Bert quickly gathered his winnings along with his friends. Inside the office nearby, the father of the beautiful woman from earlier, a man named Jack, accidentally noticed Bert's incredible goalkeeping skills during the penalty shootout. Jack was a local shop owner who also ran a small football club. Watching Bert closely, he became impressed and quietly remarked that Bert had the potential to be a real goalkeeper. Moments later, Sergeant Smith stepped out to greet Jack. Meanwhile, outside the office, Jack's daughter, Margaret, suddenly approached Bert and the men. She offered to take a penalty kick herself and even agreed to join the cigarette bet. Excited at the sight of a woman after such a long time, the men began shouting chants to cheer Margaret on. The noise echoed into the office and caught Sergeant Smith's attention. He stormed outside, scolding everyone for causing a disturbance. He took the ball away and ordered the men back to work. Margaret was sent back to the car as well, where her father firmly reprimanded her. A few days later, on a football field, Jack stood watching his players train and grew increasingly frustrated by how poorly they performed. His team was openly mocked and dismissed by a man named Robert, one of the sponsors funding the upcoming tournament that would be held at St. Helens Stadium in the coming days. Jack became deeply troubled.
It's not as bad as it looks. You dozy bugger shape up!
Fuck off! You go in goal then! Looks bad enough from where I'm standing.
That same afternoon, while buying lamb to stock his shop, the butcher teased him, saying that if Jack's team won the St. Helen match, he would sell the meat at a cheap price. But if Jack lost, the price would be doubled. pressure continued to build until Jack made a desperate decision. Early the next morning, he rushed back to the camp carrying a box of cigars, the commander's favorite. He handed them to Sergeant Smith, intending to use them as a bribe so he could temporarily borrow Bert to play as goalkeeper in the St. Helen match that day. After a long negotiation, Jack finally left the camp, with Bert sitting in his car as the team's new goalkeeper. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Bert's life. During the drive, Jack warned Bert not to speak a single word and to pretend he had a sore throat, so no one would notice his German accent. At first, Bert refused, but when he was told to choose between returning to toilet duty at the camp or playing football, he reluctantly agreed to go along with the plan. After some time, they finally arrived at the stadium locker room. Inside, Bert, who had already been warned not to speak, suddenly spoke up in front of everyone. His words immediately angered the others, as they refused to play on the same team as a German, especially one who had once been a Nazi soldier. It was clear that the hatred toward Germany ran deep, since many British people had lost their lives during the war. At first, they continued to refuse, but with time running out and hundreds of spectators already waiting, they were eventually forced to step onto the field and begin the match.
What's going on?
What's going on?
I am going to kill Dad.
Is that Ian from Warrington?
Just as Jack had predicted, Bert played incredibly well as a goalkeeper, blocking every shot that came his way. Jack's team, which had always been underestimated, won the match with a clean 3-0 victory. Not a single goal made it past Bert.
Who's the bloody goalkeeper?
Once the match ended, Jack wasted no time and immediately drove Bert back to the camp. On the way, Bert secretly took a pack of cigarettes from Jack's car, feeling he had earned something after helping the team win. After dropping Bert off, Jack searched for his cigarettes but could not find them anywhere.
You kraut bastard.
When he arrived home, his family greeted him coldly. They were upset that he had brought a former Nazi soldier to the match. Instead of calming the situation, Jack made it worse by announcing that Bert would not only help the football team, but would also start working at the shop alongside Margaret the very next day.
But starting Monday, he's going to be working in this shop.
The next morning, Jack took Bert to the grocery store. He explained the work that needed to be done, but Margaret, who also worked there, greeted Bert with clear hostility. From the look in her eyes, Bert could tell she deeply hated him for being a former Nazi. Each time they crossed paths, she turned away without saying a word. Eventually, the two of them found themselves face to face again. Bert said that he was not a monster. Margaret immediately responded by explaining why she hated the Nazis so deeply. She spoke about how they had killed and robbed innocent people, and how she once had to hide in bomb shelters instead of attending her dance lessons during the attacks. Bert then explained that he became a Nazi soldier because he had no other choice. If he had been given one, he would have chosen to dance with her instead of going to war. Hearing this, Margaret fell silent and walked back into the shop. Bert reflected on her words. Later, while lost in thought, he noticed a ball in the storage room and began kicking it against the wall again and again. That small moment became both a distraction and a way for him to train. Days passed. From Monday to Friday, Bert worked at the shop, and on Saturdays, he played football. Week after week, Jack's team kept winning, thanks to Bert's incredible skill as a goalkeeper. As time went on, Jack's family grew closer to Bert. He even made toys for Margaret's younger sibling.
Very small steps.
Margie, get out here! Bert made them for me.
Come on,
Dad, look at me!
Yeah, it's very good, love, yeah.
Several months later, all the prisoners were gathered together. Sergeant Smith announced that the Allies had won World War II. The former German soldiers at the camp were then placed into a re-education program. They had once been brainwashed under Hitler's rule, and this program was meant to help them understand that what they had done was wrong. That night, Sergeant Smith organized an outdoor film screening. The former Nazi soldiers believed they would be watching a comedy, but when the projector turned on, the film showed brutal footage of Nazi crimes, including mass killings and scenes of extreme violence. In that moment, Bert was suddenly pulled back into his past. He remembered a time when he was still a soldier, when a small child who spoke Russian or Soviet language asked for his ball to be returned after another soldier had taken it. As the child ran away, Bert's fellow soldier became angry, raised his gun, and shot the child without hesitation. Bert snapped back to the present. Around him, other former Nazi soldiers were also breaking down. Many of them had finally realized the weight of their actions, and the deep regret they carried began to crush them emotionally. Chaos followed as they blamed one another, unable to face what they had once done. The next day, Bert and Margaret spoke again outside the shop. Margaret asked what made playing football so special. Bert explained that when he played, he felt completely present. There was no past and no future, only the moment itself. He said that playing football felt just like dancing. Hearing this, Margaret smiled. The following day, during the St. Helen match, the game reached its most intense moment. Suddenly, Bert began moving as if he were dancing while controlling the ball. He did it on purpose while looking toward Margaret in the stands, making her laugh. But that happiness did not last long. One day, while cleaning the toilets at the camp, Bert discovered that his roommate had done the unthinkable. Overcome with emotion, Bert rushed into Sergeant Smith's office. He confronted him, blaming him for pushing the former soldiers into emotional collapse through overwhelming guilt and regret. Bert was then forced out of the room. As the door closed, Sergeant Smith noticed that Bert had dropped his necklace. Because of this incident, the next day, Jack received a call from the camp. He was informed that the re-education process was complete and that all prisoners would soon be sent back to their home countries, including Bert. This would happen just before the crucial match that would decide whether Jack's team would avoid relegation the following week. Hearing the news, Jack immediately felt overwhelmed. He had no idea how they could win such an important match without Bert. Margaret felt the same way. Just as she had begun to develop feelings for him, she was suddenly faced with the reality that he would soon be gone. That afternoon, inside the shop, heavy rain poured outside as Margaret sat quietly, lost in her thoughts. She could not stop wondering what would happen if she never saw Bert again. Suddenly, her younger sister, who was playing with a toy Bert had made, shouted with excitement after spotting him outside.
Bert!
When Margaret realized the man she cared about had returned, she pretended to act normal, even though her heart was racing with relief and longing. Not long after, Bert joined Jack's family at the dinner table. There, he explained that he had been allowed to stay in England for a while as long as he continued playing football, since the sport was considered the heart of the nation. In that warm moment filled with laughter and shared food, Bert felt something he had never truly known before, the feeling of being part of a family. Yet deep inside, he also felt unworthy because of his past as a former Nazi soldier. For the time being, Bert was allowed to stay at Jack's house. Soon the day arrived for their next match. It was the final game of the season and also the last match Bert would play before returning to Germany. That match was watched by Joe Thompson, a manager from the powerful club Manchester City. After an intense game, the team secured a hard-earned victory. Impressed by Bert's performance, Joe quietly approached him and offered him a position as a goalkeeper for Manchester City. That evening, a celebration was held at a local bar. Bert finally had the chance to dance with Margaret, and from that moment, their feelings for each other grew stronger. At first, Jack strongly disapproved of their relationship. Even though he had come to see Bert as family, he still struggled to accept his daughter being with a former Nâzi. But in the end, his resistance could not stop them from being together. Eventually, Bert and Margaret got married. A few years later, in 1949, Manchester City officially introduced Bert to the media as their new main goalkeeper. However, his past soon caught up with him. Journalists began pressing him with difficult questions about his time as a Nazi soldier, until the truth came out that he had once received the Iron Cross. That medal marked him as one of the honored soldiers of the Nazi regime, and many believed it meant he had taken part in the mass killings of millions of Jewish people. Margaret was devastated. She felt betrayed, realizing Bert had never told her about the medal. The news spread quickly, and Bert became hated by football fans across England, especially by Manchester City supporters, many of whom were part of the Jewish community. They could not accept the idea of a former Nâzi representing their club. That day marked Bert's first official match as the goalkeeper for Manchester City. From the very beginning, the crowd turned against him. Every mistake was met with anger, and when a goal slipped past him, the hostility only grew stronger. After the match, Bert's family stood firmly by his side. Margaret then spoke in a way that left the leaders of the Jewish community, including a man named Altman, completely silent.
Instead of helping him find a future, you lot bands together and try and break a man who's already broken.
Week after week passed. Altman continued to watch Bert closely as he fought with everything he had to defend the goal for Manchester City. Little by little, his dedication began to change hearts. Eventually, Altman chose to open his heart and accept Bert. He even wrote a public letter, calling on football fans across England not to judge a person solely by the sins of their past. After that letter spread, Bert slowly regained the trust of the public. Year after year, he became a reliable goalkeeper and a well-known figure in English football. He and Margaret later had a child together, and their life finally felt complete.
Though, of course, Troutman, prisoner of war in Britain, defending the city's goal. Mitchell took a very nice pass and beat Troutman from a shot.
Troutman saved the situation.
Was in a sea of Flanders mud.
Manchester go on to win.
Then, in 1956, Bert played in one of the most prestigious matches in English football, the FA Cup. Manchester City was already leading 3-1, and victory seemed certain.
Fine looking lads, heads held.
Takes a long shot, but straight into Van Trotman's arms. He runs, he's going to make a break for it. He scores! Well, passes to Kinsley, takes his chance and scores!
Man City were co-sleeping. Birmingham East. Back heel to Hayes, he shoots, he scores. It's completely different to last year when Man City
Bert was performing brilliantly when a powerful strike hit him, breaking his neck.
It will be a serious injury. Will they be down?
Seems to be a problem with his neck.
Need the medic!
Even so, he refused to leave the match and continued playing through the pain. In the end, Bert held on until the final whistle and helped secure the championship. From that moment on, Manchester City fans began calling him the hero. After years of being hated for his past as a former Nazi soldier, he had finally become a true legend of the game. But tragedy struck once more. One afternoon, while talking with his wife, Bert received devastating news that his child had been killed in a car accident. Days later, while visiting his child's grave, he met Sergeant Smith again. Smith returned a necklace that Bert had once dropped and revealed that his own wife and child were also buried there, having been killed during the bombing of England. From that moment on, Bert chose to step away from football. The pain of losing his child was too heavy to bear. He told Margaret that he believed this loss was punishment for the sins of his past. But Margaret refused to let him drown in guilt. She reminded him that life must go on, no matter how painful it becomes. Not long after, Bert found the strength to return to the field and continue his life as a goalkeeper once more. So the moral of the story is sometimes life really said, "You messed up, now go save goals and learn your lesson." Because apparently redemption can start with a football, a lot of regret, and one very patient heart.